All right, it's 7 o'clock right on the dot. We've got a quorum, all members of the Board of Supervisors here for our last workshop of the year and last workshop period for two of you, so congratulations. We will go ahead and begin with our invocation, followed by Pledge of Allegiance. Lord, thank you for the opportunity to all gather here tonight. Thank you for safe travels that we've had. Please be with everyone as we go through the colder season, with their health and safety throughout the winter months. Please be with all of those who are on the board tonight. Help us have wisdom and guidance to do the best in the citizens' interest for Amelia, and be with everyone here as they go home and have their travels be safe. Amen. We are missing our American flag here, so we're going to improvise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, brother. This chair just stopped. Okay, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's good. Before we get into the formal agenda for the night, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Robinson and Mr. Jones. Thank you all for being here tonight, and look forward to working with you over the next several years. Thank you, gentlemen. And do we have any adjustments needed to tonight's agenda?
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda.
All right.
I'd like to add a spot for a discussion of a burn ban proposal.
Okay.
It'll be an emergency addition, and Ken will have all the information for us when we get to that.
Okay. Do you care where it is, or just add it to the end?
Unless he needs to leave.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other adjustments? All those in favor of the agenda as amended, respond to sign of aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right. And with that, we'll move right into the presentation of our annual audit results. And that's Mr. Lupton.
How are you all doing this evening?
Good, thank you.
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm going to run through a brief presentation for you guys. And I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully it works. And if you have any issues hearing me or seeing anything, please stop and let me know. Can you all see that slideshow?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. So moving right in to the presentation. So just a brief overview. I'm going to go over some required communications that we need to have with you all, the governing body, which includes auditors and auditee responsibilities, and also the results of the audit for the fiscal year 2021. What you will see, and you haven't received a copy of this yet because this gets sent with the final packet of information related to the FY 2021 audit. This is the governance letter. It's comprised of 6 main sections, and I'll run through those here. The first is the distinction between management and auditors' responsibilities. Management is ultimately responsible for the financial statements that are presented in the financial report, and they are also responsible for maintaining an environment of internal controls relevant to the fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We, the auditors, are responsible for obviously performing the audit, but also performing the audit in accordance with auditing standards that are set by our professional body. We are also, based on our audit and based on the information that we gathered in the audit, we then provide an opinion on the financial statements as they are presented. Another section in the letter is difficulties encountered in performing the audit. I'm pleased to report there were no difficulties that we encountered in performing our audit. There were very few minimal misstatements that we proposed adjustments for, and those misstatements were corrected, and all adjustments were posted to the books by the finance department. We had no disagreements with management in applying accounting principles. And it is our understanding that management did not seek kind of outside or second opinions from other auditors. We call this opinion shopping. And if this were to be done, it would raise red flags, and we would it would be something that we would want to discuss with you all. But it is our understanding that there were no other communications with outside auditors related to the FY 2021 financial statements. And finally, there are no other significant matters to note at this time. There is one, I guess, fairly significant matter. There was a new GASB this year. GASB is the Government Accounting Standards Board. They issue statements that apply to the financial reporting of governmental entities. That was effective this year's GASB statement number 84. And that kind of clarifies the reporting for fiduciary activities. And so if you're comparing the financial statements from last year to this year, you'll see slight differences in the reporting of the fiduciary activities of the county. And then you'll also see on the school board side the addition of the school activity funds as a special revenue fund on the school board. So I just want to point that out to you in case you are doing a kind of year-to-year comparison there. So for the financial report, the audited financial report, or the comprehensive annual financial report, is broken down into four main sections: introductory section, financial section, statistical section, compliance section, and I'll briefly cover each one of those. First, our opinion, and this is kind of what you all care most about, usually. This is our opinion on the financial statements. It is unmodified. In other words, it is a clean opinion. Basically, that means that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. The next section in the financial report document that you'll come across is management's discussion and analysis. This is a nice brief narrative overview of the financial activities and happenings in the year. And so if you have a few minutes only to read through the document, I recommend reading this because it does provide a nice, succinct, brief overview of the financial activities for the year. Jumping into the governmental funds financials, Exhibit 3 is the balance sheet for all governmental funds. This is prepared on the modified accrual basis, which is the same basis as what you all prepare the budget on. So this is very much, appropriate to decision making. The county ended the year with combined fund balance for the governmental funds of around $18.37 million. The general fund had a total fund balance of around $8.73 million. Unassigned fund balance for governmental funds was around $7.68 million. And unassigned committed accounted for $16.48 million. And again, both of those categories are available for appropriation at the discretion of you all, the board. And as we're going along, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop and let me know. Exhibit 5 is the statement of changes for the year. Again, this is based and prepared on the modified accrual basis. Combined fund balances increased in the fiscal year 2021 by $1.78 million. And again, this is the governmental funds only. So it excludes any of the business type funds, the water fund that is considered to be an enterprise or proprietary type fund. General fund balance decreased by about $766,000, and this is after transfers on the general fund side. Capital projects fund, the fund balance increased by about $2.49 million. And again, I think the increase in fund balance is mostly linked to a new short-term landfill contract that has been in place for a couple of years now. And you know, the management's discussion analysis does provide a brief analysis and explanation and review of the fund balance and the changes there too. Exhibit 12 is the budget and actual financial presentation, again prepared on the modified accrual basis of accounting. What you'll see when you look at this particular schedule is that general fund revenues exceeded the budget by about $384,000, and general fund expenditures were under budget by about $1.93 million. So on the positive side of both of those there. And again, a brief explanation and analysis of the budgetary comparison can be found in the management's discussion and analysis. Exhibit 8, this is the statement of changes for the enterprise fund activities, the business type activities. These are a little bit different than the governmental fund financial statements in that they're prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting, being that there are business type activities. Basically, what this means is that it also includes capital assets, related accumulated depreciation and depreciation expense, and also the net pension and OPEB liabilities and the changes thereto for those particular items. And those are not as, you know, I guess, imperative to get an understanding of when developing the budget, just because they are longer term items that don't necessarily impact the annual budgets on a year-to-year basis. But total net position in the enterprise fund was around $4.76 million. There was a slight net operating loss of $160,000 and a net total loss before transfers of around $206,000. This next part of the presentation is some graphical depictions of different items, and you can see here this is the governmental fund balance over the last 5 years, and the bars there represent restricted, committed, and unassigned. That brown color is restricted, the blue is committed, and the green is unassigned. The increase in the committed fund balance this year is related to the commitments for capital projects. As of June 30, 2021. This depiction of governmental fund revenues, you can see there is a positive trajectory for almost all revenues there. There's a big jump in intergovernmental revenues, which we would all probably presume to be the case, given that there was a lot of federal funds that flowed to local governments in fiscal year 2021. So this is representative partially of that. But as you can see, a steady increase in the property tax revenue over the last 5 years. And the charges for services increased slightly over the term there, and again, I believe that's related to the landfill contract there, that the increase from 2019 to 2020, then that increase from 2020 to 21. This is a pie chart of the total governmental revenues, just a different format of presenting the information. As you can see here, property taxes was approximately 41.6% of total revenues for the fiscal year 2021. Intergovernmental is the second most with 26.8%. And then from there, you have charges for services, other local taxes, and then the more nominal items that are presented at the top of the pie chart there. Moving to the expenditure side, we're excluding capital project expenditures from this as they can skew the information in some years. So over the last 5 years, you can see a representation of the governmental fund expenditures here. And that top line there, that is the line for education-related expenditures. As you can see, there's a pretty big jump from 2020 to 21. That jump is in line with the increase in the budgeted school board appropriation approved in the FY 2020 budget. You can see, as you know, we would expect the increase in public safety expenditures as well as a result of COVID-related measures in the last fiscal year. And again, just a different representation of the information that we looked at previously. Education expenditures was about 33.4% of total governmental fund expenditures. Public safety related expenditures around 26.4%. General government 13.6%. Health and welfare 10.8%. And then the more nominal items spread around there. Public works, cultural rec and community development, and judicial administration. The statistical section is also a nice representation of historical information for the county, and this is actually over 10 years. I showed you some information over the last 5 years and presented that in graphical and table form. But statistical information is financial data. It's numbers, but does really provide a good way to access historical trend data and other financial information over the last 10 years for the county. The last section of the audit report, or the financial report document, is the compliance section. We are required under governmental auditing standards to issue a report on internal control and compliance. And in that report, we're required to note any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we encountered when assessing the internal control environment of the county. We're pleased to report that we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we would need to bring to your attention today. And then finally, the auditor's report on uniform guidance. That's the single audit report in accordance with the uniform guidance and again, governmental auditing standards. We audited 2 major federal programs this year. Those 2 federal programs were the Coronavirus Relief Fund program and the Educational Stabilization Fund program, which is the school board's piece of CARES Act money, or what they call as ESSER, which is an acronym for the larger program named there. And in performing the single audits of those 2 programs, we did not encounter any instances of non-compliance over those programs that we single audited. So that's the information I have to present to you all this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have at this time.
I think it looks thorough and no questions here, Mr. Lupton. Thank you very much for your time tonight and during the report itself. When do you expect we'll get the final report from you?
Yes, so we are, it's going through our quality control process right now. We expect that report to be issued sometime next week. So you will see the final report document along with the letters that I referenced in this presentation sometime next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great results. Yes, thank you, Carla Cave, Stephanie Coleman, and Laura Walsh. Great work for you and all of your offices as well. Very good. All right, we got Mr. Lauterberg and team from VML VACO.
Do you have a flash drive?
Good evening. Yes, we do.
You do. And do you all want to control the slides, or do you want me to do it?
I can do that.
You do it? Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Hello. How you doing? Good. Yes.
I'm assuming it's under Amelia.
Yes. And then benchmark.
I'm just going to share the screen.
Actually, you want to sit here? Sure.
Sorry, the little arrows down there, you just have to click them. So
Yeah.
once this isn't recorded.
Okay. It's a pleasure to be here with you all again tonight. Thank you. Tonight, I'm assisted by two municipal advisors from our staff. Taylor Bryant, you met, I think, at our last meeting. And then also Caroline Roberts will be presenting as well. Caroline is a municipal advisor who joined us this year. She was previously a financial analyst with Capital One. And so she's taken the test just recently to become a municipal advisor. So we're very proud of our team. We now have 5 municipal advisors working for VML Baco. So tonight we're delivering our credit benchmarks report. And if you remember at the last meeting when the board decided to procure this report, what we wanted to do is look at some key financial metrics and compare Amelia County to your peers, and even more importantly, to benchmarks that credit rating agencies use, that lenders use, so that if you go into the debt markets, if you are financing projects in the future, you'll want to know how would an investor view Amelia County today. And then once you take on additional debt and the obligations that come with that, additional debt service, additional debt that has to be paid off in the future as well, how does that impact the financials of the county? So those are some questions, some fundamental questions that we're going to try to address tonight. Tonight is about giving you some general information, some guidelines that you might want to follow as you implement your capital improvement plan. So we've taken a look at your capital improvement plan. It's pretty extensive. There's a lot of items on that, and we're seeing between $80-90 million in capital projects. Some of those will be revenue supported, but the majority of them probably will be supported by general tax revenues. So there's a lot to think about, and we want to proceed cautiously, I think, with those plans. So our hope is we'll give you some guidelines, to think about, so you can prioritize those projects, and then we'd be delighted to work with you to help you time the projects, to determine the best way to finance them and to structure that debt as we go forward. So let me just tell you what our process will be tonight, and then I'm going to have Caroline give you some preliminary findings. So in our credit benchmarks analysis, we follow these steps. And the first one is to identify for you what we think are some of the key determinants of credit quality, some of the key things that a rating agency, whether it's Moody's, Standard & Poor's, or Fitch, would use to review your credit. And then secondly, looking at those 4 areas, try to answer the question for you: how does Amelia County and peer localities in this area compare to the recognized benchmarks? Thirdly, assuming that you maintain the level of credit quality that you think is important, how much is available in your current resources to pay for some of these projects in cash? So we're not here with a predisposition to debt or financing. We want to see if you have available resources that can be used for projects that you use that first and foremost. And then lastly, if there is a need for debt to fund all the projects that you consider priorities, and you want to maintain a desired level of credit quality, what are the implications in terms of how much you can borrow and how do you structure the debt? So that's what we hope to answer for you tonight. Caroline Roberts has has taken a deep dive into the county's financials and also your peers. So she's going to present for you what she's found.
All right, as Bob mentioned, we wanted to take a deep dive into some of these key metrics to assess the credit quality of the county. As you can see here, we have 4 main areas that I took a look at as part of this analysis. This methodology is kind of a blend of some different methodologies from other credit rating agencies that Bob mentioned. So we feel good about the structure that we used to be able to take this out to market and have a good sense of the credit quality. I also want to touch on here things such as economic base are less controllable for the county. That might take like longer term planning to move the needle on any of the metrics here, while the latter 3 metrics are more in control for the county to immediately take action on. And a lot of our recommendations will be geared around those latter 3 determinants. So we'll start with diving into the economic base. As Bob mentioned, we wanted to take a look at some of the peers in the immediate area for Amelia, and starting with looking at population growth over the last couple of decades. So as you can see, the county is growing, while growth in the last 10 years has slowed some compared to the prior decade. The growth is not slowing nearly as much as some of our peers, and the county is in the top 3 fastest growing counties of this selection of peers. So trending nicely here in terms of population growth, and especially relative to some of the other peers that are experiencing population decline. Next, we wanted to take a look at median household income relative to the Virginia median and see how Amelia stacks up to some of their peers. As you can see, Amelia is not the lowest of the peers that we have represented here, but there is room for growth, and can kind of aspire to kind of move closer to that median. But they're kind of middle of the pack of their peers. So that's trending similar to the populations. I think we can see they go hand in hand in terms of economic development and population growth feeding into the median household income. Next, we wanted to see how that translated to the taxable assessed value. So how does that translate to the tax base that the county is working with? As you can see here, the taxable assessed value has been steadily increasing over the last 5 years. You can see that there was a bump in 2019 when there was a reassessment for the county. But on average, there's been an annual growth rate of 4% since 2016. So this is looking strong and healthy and consistent for the tax base here. Next, we'll go into the governmental fund revenues. So this is looking at the total governmental fund. You can see here that the revenues are trending upwards over the last 5 years, but you can kind of see in 2018 and 2019, there are some dips and it's not entirely a straight trajectory upwards. So I wanted to take a look into kind of what is driving the volatility within revenue. As we've seen, the tax base is steadily increasing. We would anticipate a similar trend with revenue. So we wanted to dive in a bit deeper to what makes up the governmental fund revenue. So breaking the fund revenue down into its various sources, there's 2 items that jumped out at me as being considerably more volatile than some of the other sources. You can see that from 2020 to 2021, the federal percentage of the general fund revenue sources jumped from 6% in 2020 to 12%, which that makes sense with all the large funds that the county has received. But if you also see charges for services is incredibly variable from year to year, spanning from 5% to 20% in other years. And we believe that's the key driver of the revenue volatility. And if you are, I'm sure you are familiar with the charges for services that's driven by the landfill host fees. So we kind of wanted to take a look at that a bit closer. So drilling in specifically to the landfill fees that make up the majority of charges for services. We can see that they've grown significantly in the past 5 years, but it's pretty dramatic visualization, but they are incredibly volatile and can jump from 1 year to the next and are not an entirely reliable revenue source. But it is a nice perk for the county that they are able to bring in these fees. And then, yeah, to better understand kind of what the actual trajectory for the total revenue would be, I wanted to look at backing out those landfill fees to like understand what like an actual consistent trajectory would be for the total revenue, removing that to get a better sense for forecasting and get a better sense of kind of what revenue that the county was generating outside of those landfill contracts. So that's the top orange line is the total revenue. The green line is the landfill fees at the bottom, and then backing out that from the total revenue, you get that purple line in the middle. So it's much more nice and smooth and has a nice upward trajectory and is much more reliable to kind of base any forecasting or cash flow projections to do any sort of planning for the future. Next, we touched on total revenue. I wanted to dive into just tax revenue. So although Amelia, of course, heavily relies on property taxes at making up 80% of tax revenue, compared to their peers, the remainder of the tax revenue sources are pretty diverse compared to some of their peers. So that's good that although we are heavily dependent on the property taxes, that we do have some great tax revenue streams that are pretty diverse, that they're not kind of too heavily dependent on one or the other. And from looking at taxes, I wanted to get a sense of, and that really stable property tax revenue that the county brings in. I wanted to get a sense of what does that real estate tax rate stack up against the peers as well. And you can see that Amelia has a really great rate compared to their peers. So I'd say that is a real credit positive in terms of being attractive for bringing in more folks to the county and businesses to the county. That could be really attractive for economic development, as well as it's also a positive that you kind of have that lever in your back pocket in terms of a downturn were to come about. If need be, worse comes to worse, like you have some wiggle room to raise rates, certainly compared to some of your peers that have less flexibility there. All right, so we've covered revenue. Wanted to dive into how spending and the fund balance stacked up against revenues. So here we have the governmental fund expenses, and this is net of any one-time capital expenses during the fiscal year. So you can see prior to 2021, expenses were very level and pretty consistent year over year. And there was obviously a significant increase in 2021, yet driven by education spending and public safety for obvious reasons why those budgets got picked up a notch this year.
This is not net of federal fund, one-time federal funds, only net of capital improvement.
Identified as capital outlays, yeah.
Yeah, because I think, you know, we saw that you see it here as well as in the audit report earlier, and it looks like, you know, we've just done a significant increase in spending, whereas our budget is just minimal increases. I think it's really important people understand this is really the pass through of the federal funding that's looking at this. We've not as a county chosen to spend significantly more. Yeah.
I think that's agreed.
And I know you saw that on your earlier slide. You saw the federal funds income go up so much more as well, but.
That is great to call out. Yeah, I didn't want to parse out too much and draw too many assumptions, but that's a great call.
Well, I think that's fine when you're just working with the facts, but we know we've made minimal change.
Yes, I know you guys probably know better than us, but that's a great call out.
Because it's really important. There's no expectation we're going to stay at that level going for, like we talked about all the extra pay that was done to public safety, for example.
Right.
Those were primarily one-time, you know, emergency pay for handling COVID. Schools were many one-time funds as well. Neither will sustain.
I think, quick question, that we looked at the 22 audit and it looked like that, excuse me, budget. It looked like the expenses were relatively level with 21.
Well, you've got a lot of federal funds left there as well.
Some more one-time expenses.
Well, one time or just carried forward.
Okay.
Not all of that's been spent, for
Right.
example.
Okay,
Some's been allocated, not spent yet.
okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you for that. And from there, we wanted to look at operating trends, so revenue net of the expenses we just saw. So for this view, I am including the federal revenue and capital one-time expenses to get a better like one-to-one with the audit report. So you can see here that Amelia has maintained a surplus. 2016 is a small surplus, but it's there. A maintained a surplus, so you guys are doing a great job at balancing the budget and balancing your spending in terms of the revenue that you're bringing in. All right, from there, we'll go into the unassigned fund balance. So this is a metric we like to look at. So it's unassigned fund balance as a percentage of revenue. So we have a few benchmarks here to get a sense of kind of where the county stands in terms of like how a credit rating agency would look at. This is like funds available that you have to work with at your discretion. So you can see for 2021, we're coming in, the county is coming in at 42%, which is well above the Moody's very strong benchmark and significantly above the VRA strong benchmark at 10%. So I'd say this metric is very strong for the county. And moving on to the last bucket of metrics is looking at the debt. The county does not carry much debt. It's, as you can see here, it's been steadily declining, which is great for you guys. But it's freeing up capacity for the county to be able to take on new projects. But as you can see, the debt's been on a steady decline for the last 5 years. And from here, this is the debt as a percentage of the taxable assessed value. So this is kind of showing what capacity the county has relative to the assessed value. So you can see we have 3 benchmarks, one from VRA, one from Moody's, and I guess 2 from Moody's. And the county is coming in well below those benchmarks. So it's not necessarily suggesting you should borrow up to that limit, but it's just kind of showing the capacity that the county has to borrow. So that's looking healthy as well. And this metric is debt service. This is the amount that the county is paying on an annual basis for any debt that they're carrying. So this is kind of what we like to think of as debt affordability. So you might have the capacity to take on a lot more debt, but we want to make sure that it's not eating up too much of revenue and too large of a portion of expenses. So the benchmark we have here is at 15%. As you can see in 2021, the county is coming in well below that at around 2%. So there's definitely a bit more flexibility there to take on a bit more debt as well, if that is part of the plan. Right, so as we identified on some of the previous slides, there are a lot of credit positives for the county. The growing population and tax base, low property tax rates, steady growth of tax revenues, strong fund balance, and low and declining debt service. A few areas of opportunity which will lead us into our recommendations. We would recommend an opportunity we see is allocating excess fund balances to capital projects, utilizing debt capacity for priority POC projects, and leveraging those low property tax rates for economic development. I will turn it back to Bob.
Thank you. So I think what Caroline laid out is that the county's in strong financial shape. You have strong fund balances, low levels of debt, low levels of debt service, a growing population. And in most of these metrics, the county looks very strong. So you do have the capacity to finance additional capital projects that are in your plan if that's a priority for the county. So let's get a little bit more granular and talk about how much debt can the county prudently take on. And that's really going to be guided by what is the consensus policy of the Board of Supervisors in terms of what are appropriate levels of debt, how much fund balance should we maintain. So let's begin with the fund balance. And currently, your unassigned fund balance, net of capital projects, taking the capital project fund out of it, your unassigned fund balance is about 42% of revenues. We're recommending here that the county consider possibly as a policy for your consideration and maintaining an unassigned fund balance of 30%. We think that maintaining it at that level would allow you to take the excess funds of over 30% and apply them to capital projects. So let me show you on the next page what that looks like. So this is your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of revenues going back to 2016. So you've been well in excess of the level that we're recommending, 30%. It's gone as high as 51%. The reason we're recommending 30% is twofold. One is, you saw in the previous chart, Moody's, I think the largest rating agency, their recommendation is that a locality is very strong if they maintain a 30% fund balance. So that's kind of their highest level of performance in that area. For VRA, they think it's strong if you have a 10% fund balance. Now, one thing that has to be weighed against those is the size of Amelia. It's probably larger, or probably smaller than some of the localities that Moody's typically rates. Those are localities that are in the bond market with large bond issues typically. So these are going to be large cities, large counties. So we have to weigh that a little bit. BRA probably is more risk tolerant because of their mission to assist local governments in Virginia. So we're not proposing a level that we think would pose a risk to the county. We think that 30% being at the Moody's range is appropriate in this case. So that's our first recommendation. And then next.
So that's conservative, you're saying?
We think it's conservative. When you think about it, that's almost 4 months of expenses. So if you think of it that way, if there was a disruption to the county, you're maintaining a strong fund balance. If you had 0 revenues for 4 months, you would be able to plug the hole, just to put it in perspective. Next one. So next, we're recommending that you implement a policy on debt and debt service levels. So this is going the other way. This is setting a limit on how much debt the county should issue. You got a pretty clean slate because you have low levels of debt right now. And so we're currently, your bonded debt being debt that's supported by general tax revenues. Bonded debt is well less than 1% of taxable assessed value. So that's kind of looking at how much burden is there on the taxpayers in the county. So it's looking at taxable assessed value, and you're below 1% of that. Your debt service, the percentage of your budget that goes to debt service, is just over 2% of total expenses. So that's where the county is today. Our recommendation is that for setting a ceiling on the amount of debt, that you set that at 4% of taxable assessed value, which is considerably higher than you are today. And debt service as a percentage of total expenses, 15%. And it seems very high compared to where the county is today. We're looking at this a couple of ways. We're looking at the capital improvement plan, which has approaching $90 million in projects on that plan. I think Taylor's going to show you some hard numbers in a minute. And it's probably going to be very difficult to approach, $90 million or high levels like that, with these limits. Now, there's ways around that potentially. Some of the debt in the capital improvement plan is for water and sewer system, and that can be supported by your rates that the ratepayers are paying for that. So that could be moved outside of the general fund if it can be supported with rates.
And I think it's important though to remember, there's a lot of things at the tail end of that CIP that have just been bumped out long-term and it's not real. They're not real. I mean, so when we say they're in the plan, they're there, but they're not, there's no expectation of spending that. So I think that's just really important for everyone to keep in mind. For example, build a new high school is there and it just every year it bumps out further and further. That's one of the largest expenses and there's no current plan to be able to move forward for that. So I think all this is still helpful, but I just caution, particularly for any citizens watching or future, there is no plan for that level of spending.
Understandable. Yeah. And again, we're proposing a limit.
Right.
We're not
like the
saying
idea of the
just
limit.
go out and borrow this much.
Yeah.
Even if you went to that limit, that's a challenge in itself because, are those revenues readily available today to pay for debt service? Probably not. So it's something I know you all have managed, the county in a very conservative way. We want to put a limit for the long term, so the county doesn't go above those levels. If you go to the next chart, I have a couple things to show. We're going back to these charts that Caroline showed you. So net bonded debt as a percentage of taxable assessed value. You're at very low levels today. And again, that's below where Moody's says is a very strong place to be, at least for larger size localities. Moody's average for all the localities that they rate for bond issues comes in at about 2%. So that's an average, a nationwide average. VRA, a little more forgiving. They say that your debt as a percentage of taxable assessed value should be no more than 6%. They think it's adequate to be at 6%. So what we're proposing as a policy, and again, this is a ceiling, is somewhere in between this average that Moody's cites and what VRA allows, and that would be around 4%. That's for your consideration. You may have a different idea, but I think having a policy that'll be very helpful, I think, as you consider the projects, and that includes sometimes saying yes to projects, but also sometimes saying no to projects. And one more. So debt service is a percentage of total expenses. Again, our recommendation was 15%. That's the VRA standard. That's also what Standard & Poor's uses as a benchmark. I just took a look at Fitch Ratings, another rating agency. The way they don't measure debt service in isolation. They look at all liability. So they look at debt service and combine that with pension liabilities and OPEB liabilities to come up with a measure. So they say, as I recall, for a AA locality, they say you can go up to 20% of those things. And so if you backed out your pension liability, which isn't very large, you would come back to around 12% or so. So we thought as a policy, 15% might be a good target to shoot for as a ceiling, as a ceiling. Right. So what this comes down to is what we're proposing is a capital project funding strategy that follows these steps. So the first one is to apply your landfill revenues, which, as Caroline pointed out, they're very volatile. So with volatile revenues, you don't want to use those for recurring operating costs. That can put you in a dangerous situation when those revenues dip. So we like the idea, which I think is current policy in the county, to put those landfill revenues in a capital projects fund. I think that's a very smart thing to do. And the balance in that fund now at the end of 21, this may have changed since then, but as of June 30th, it was $8.7 million. Secondly, if you say,
Does that 8.7 account for the committed anything, or is that totally uncommitted?
That's.
Okay.
Then secondly, if you adopted the 30% target for your fund balance, then you could take the excess above that and use that for capital projects. The idea is never go below the 30% target. But when you go above it, take those funds, they haven't been budgeted, right? So take those funds, use them for a one-time purpose, like capital projects. It's very appropriate to use it that way. In fiscal 21, we calculated $2.2 million could be used that way. And I don't think that includes CARES Act or anything. I think that's actual surplus. So that's 2.2 million. So combined, that's $10.9 million. So when you talk about funding capital projects, we're saying you don't even have to look at debt necessarily for the first $10 million of this. You have 10.9 million or so that is probably available today to cash fund some projects. Yeah, you may want to reserve some of those funds, maybe finance today because interest rates are like alarmingly low.
Right.
So maybe this is a good time to do it. If it's part of a long-term plan, if you know there's going to be additional debt in the future, maybe start with debt now, build up cash, and when these rates start going higher, use the cash at that time. So that
Leverage what you have today.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. But that's a judgment call for the board. We just want to lay out, what the parameters are. And then lastly, the last resort, issue debt to fund projects that can't be cash funded or that you've chosen not to cash fund. So the big exciting conclusion to this presentation is Taylor's part of this, because he's going to give you some actual numbers where he's looked at various levels of financing. We're not looking at any particular projects tonight, but we're going to tell you different levels of funding, what kind of debt service is associated with that. So when you're doing your planning, you know what kind of obligation comes along with that. So Taylor, you want me to start for you?
So the first thing we did, I'll be sure the next one, was look at the capital improvement plan, and just kind of isolated projects that were over $1 million, sort of grouped it into the governmental fund balance, and then as well as the proprietary fund balance, and kind of mainly looking at the governmental fund because that'll be supported, not by revenue, more by GO lease revenue type debt, whereas the proprietary funds will be, all revenue from paid by rate payers. So in looking at that, just pulling off, general ballpark item for maybe the next 2 years, if this is accurate, $10 million was the first thing I wanted to look at. And those look like high school, type projects. So it'd probably be funded through Virginia Public School Authority if we went out to the credit market today. They offer a pooled financing program with low cost of issuance and they get great ratings. So that's usually the best way to finance any school projects in the state of Virginia. So if you go to the next page.
Oops.
Sorry. Little error on it.
Okay.
So, and we looked at a couple.
Taylor thinks I'm technologically challenged.
I know, yes. Yeah. We wanted to look at a couple different scenarios. First with this is,
You're helping his case.
yeah, so I guess, the first situation we looked at was $10 million and you can finance these over a number of different terms. Obviously, you want to try to keep that on your books in the shortest time possible, but you got to meet the cash flow needs of the locality. BPSA will go out to 30 years. And realistically, what we're looking at and seeing, if you went to the credit markets today, based off of where rates are, one of the shortest terms the county could probably handle at this point would be 20 years for 10 million. And that's assuming that full amount is financed. Take in mind a number of things will influence the ultimate financing, timing, where rates are, and which pool you get in, all those sorts of things. And also, you really want to time the debt issuance around, say, when future debt is falling off. I think the county has one loan mature in 2024 and 2027. Those would be optimal years to decide to go into the market if you wanted to do that. Also, the way you can structure your debt service, you don't have to, you can structure principal to occur later in that if you wanted to wait for some debt service to fall off and things like that. So there's a number of things you can do to try to keep a level debt payment every year. And so there's just some things you want to keep in mind before, going through this. But in this scenario, did 10 million financed through BPSA. They just had a sale in early November. And just, because we don't know really what point in time this would be, where rates would be. I added 30 basis points to each maturity just to be conservative. Assumed a GO bond, which is automatically GO through BPSA, a 20-year term, and then just an estimated interest rate that I grossed up a little bit based off their most recent sale, 211 true interest costs fixed for the term. And ultimately the debt service on about an average annual debt service would be $667,000. That's just on, the new 10 million. And then when you combine that, so that's, fiscal year 21 there in the blue is the previous debt service. That's, the blue and the green is, the blue and the yellow is when you add the new debt service in and it gets you up to about 1.2 million. And then, all this relative to that recommendation that we sent right now, debt service, the 22 expenses is 5.23%. So you're still well under that 15% recommendation that we have. And, we think that's something that's, manageable at 20 years, definitely. So if we go to the next slide, it's sort of the same scenario, but over 30 years. So, all the same terms, the rate's going to be a little bit higher because you're going out farther in time, but it's going to give you some cash flow relief because you're paying off over a longer point. And with that, so each year the cash flow requirement to service the debt goes down. So the estimated annual debt service on this would be about 481,000 just if it was today kind of thing, just ballpark. So with that, the debt service to expenses goes down to 4.39%. So you're well under that recommendation. It seems to be a manageable level. If you go on. This is just an illustration of that, sort of the same thing, where you have been. And then if you did it, the $10 million, that would be at 0.8%. So well under all the recommendations that we put up there. And then just to show, I think we didn't realize that high school wasn't necessarily going to happen, but, just looking at a larger level of debt, so this is something, that would be definitely need to be planned, seems to be farther in the future if you were to ever do issuance of this size. Certainly, we're suggesting that you use cash while available to fund that. But if you were to ever have a project of this magnitude, there would certainly be need to finance it. So there would be a timing issue with it in terms of structuring it, also, around current issues, things like that. So we assume the same, just if it was a school project, issuing it through BPSA, which is almost always our recommendation when you're doing school projects. A 30-year term, absolutely, because of just the size. And then the rate sort of estimated again, kept it consistent with the previous one. And the debt service with that is $1.92 million. Now, That has, it's significantly higher, but it's still well under the expense cap there. We're not, I guess what's important with this is we're not saying that's necessarily the affordability, it's the capacity. We were talking earlier, it's like your credit card, there's a credit limit and then you have a credit card payment. They're two different things. So it's not a recommendation necessarily that you go out and get to that amount, but it's showing you if you were to incur debt at this level, you would still be under that recommendation based off of a preliminary analysis in today's market. Can we go on to the next one? And this is showing that you're still, under a recommendation of 4%, even if you got all the way up to $40 million in a single issuance, you'd still be 1% under that cap there. So the county has a good, standing, mostly because there's not any existing debt to speak of really. So there's some, significant capacity. While we do stress, using PAYGO funding and cash funding projects, there's some capacity to stay well under these thresholds to get to, some level of capital projects you need to do with employing debt. And so this is just all of those scenarios that are combined, showing you the different ones, the current debt at 2.37% of expenses. If you did that 10 million over 20 years, it's 5.23, 30 years on the 10 million, it's 4.39. And then if you did 40 million over 30 years, it's about 11%.
Okay. So delighted to take any questions already.
Presentation.
Yeah, very clear.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you all for doing that. Greatly appreciate that. Great that we've got two new board members here to get this, because we're getting into the budget kickoff cycle and you've got all this coming up really rapidly for you. Carla, maybe we could think about putting the specific policy items on the January workshop. And that way we could discuss with the new board at that point, and then put proposal for voting on those on the January regular. Because I think what you've highlighted is it'd be good for us to have policies around these things regardless. I mean, the amounts, that's what we can talk about in January with the full new board, but to not have a policy at all on these then means there's no limits or structure at all for it. So seems like those are good highlights. And I think you've shown us a lot of better ways we can be stewards of the county's and the citizens' money than just letting it sit in the bank, which doesn't benefit the citizens. So great. Thank you all.
And what they're saying is the 4% and 15% are safe, conservative limits.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thank you both. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you can make sure that Carla or someone has that copy of the presentation, we need that one and the audit presentation to get on the website tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Sean, the next three items are yours, so you can go in the stated order or mix them up if you want, but they're all yours.
All right, the personnel policy isn't as much mine as I just wanted to initiate it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know much about it. So there's been a lot of talk, and I've had a few citizens call me with concerns and misconceptions on the new personnel policy. Some people basically think that the board wants to take over all of the offices, including constitutional officers, and that's not true. That's not happening, and I wouldn't even agree with it. That's government overreach in all forms. So I just wanted some discussion to make it clear so that everybody understands that's not what we're going to do, and that was never the intention at all, as well as any other items about it. I know you're still in the process of working on it, but.
No, you're exactly right. That's what we've said about 6 meetings this year, and people continue to spread different discussion. I'm not sure what else we can do to clarify. So, yeah. Policy doesn't change anybody's authority. It just implements consistent rules across the county.
Right. As far as I understand it, I actually talked to Ms. Coleman the other day about like the individual constitutional officers, they are the end all be all of their office because they're elected.
Correct.
They answer to nobody but the people. So that will never change, can't change. And they still have, will still retain control over they can hire and fire at any time because of their position, and none of that would change. But it would give us a more more level playing field as far as across the board jobs, positions, pay, that kind of thing would equal out.
That's exactly right.
That's my understanding. That's what I've been telling people, but I just wanted to make it official so I wasn't saying the wrong things. Okay.
Anything you want to add? You're on the,
No, that's exactly the way we started. And
yeah,
hopefully that's the way we end up.
you got it right. Thanks.
Sounds good to me. All right, the ARPA, I've got a few things for that, and Carla, she's still in here.
Yeah.
I can talk on the new thing for Daryl if you want me to, so I guess I'll hit the first one. I guess you got the email today about Daryl's small addition, so I'll just update everybody. We had approved for him to spend 220,000 in the meter project, making all the meters automated, which will free up a large amount of personnel time and expense. He left out a portion of it. Was it for the larger meters? For the larger.
Oh, there he is. He's over there.
Too many people, I can't get thinking that it was unsure what the expense is. And he found out and let us know that it would be $15,000 more. And that would finish off the county. So I think it's a great investment. And we've got the money to go ahead and just add that to it. So it'd be a 235,000 total for that project.
And just to clarify for everybody, we're talking about the American Rescue Act plan. So these are all federal corona funds. There's no we're not talking about spending any of Amelia's tax funds. And as Sean said, automating these meters then frees up the time for public works, which should reduce the timing of when we would need more employees within public works. So it's ultimately a savings for the county. Yeah.
And to reiterate, it's $2.5 million that we have of that.
Right.
Which we're trying, the goal is to keep most of it, largest portion for internet. But some of these things, I think a few of these little quick things that we should grab. So the next thing I have is a couple of new items. We discussed a few different things, and one of the things Daryl has in the CIP is a mobile generator. Forgot, I didn't write down what wattage it was, but pretty hefty, one of the dual axle large generators.
65.
For around 70,000. With the winter coming on, and we all know what happened last winter, this generator could pretty much power anything that they needed it to anywhere in the county.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we go ahead and allow him free up the money so he can go ahead and purchase that. We can pull it out of the CIP, which will free up potential CIP funds anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I see that as a fairly needed emergency use item.
So you want to take that out of the CIP and use the ARPA fund?
Yeah, so so he doesn't have to wait till July to
Mm-hmm.
purchase it, And the last thing that we talked about was these portable light towers,
Yeah.
the little diesel generator towers. The county doesn't own any. We found that out earlier this year. And
And they were needed. Yeah.
they looked it up. They're worst case around 20,000 a piece. And I didn't get a hard number, two to four possibly total.
Two would get us started.
Or at least two. And they would have multiple uses as
Yeah.
not just public works, but certain emergency services calls and stuff. I'm sure they're really handy to have, and we just don't have any. So I'd like to
What happened to the mobile bathroom unit, which was the same purpose as well? Like we said,
we talked about it. My concern was that it may end up being more of a burden. Like if we don't use it, it's something that you invest in. It's,
Mhm.
you're looking at 35,000-ish for one that is handicap compliant. And I was talking to Daryl about it. I don't know that we would use it enough to justify that kind of money
Mhm.
versus just renting as needed. So
Okay.
we kind of held off on that one.
Okay. We don't, just for everyone's knowledge, we don't have to vote on these because you've already authorized a committee to work through these. We're just, as we promised, bringing back from the committee information.
Just let
discussion.
everybody, the citizens know what we are doing with it, and
Yeah.
that it is still a process.
So it's open for discussion. I'm just clarifying, we don't have to vote.
And even the light towers double as a generator.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do we ever get a size on that?
What size generator runs a light tower?
It'd be 4 to 5.
So if you do all that, how much is left over?
Still over 2 million left.
Yeah, because that's,
It's a very minimal amount of.
it'd still be like 2.2 million, give or take, 2.1 something.
Does the bigger generator have a light tower on it?
No, he sent a picture. It's one of them big,
Mm,
dual axle pull behind, but
dedicated trailer that's like, so it's always been, okay.
Sean, have you already looked at where these could fit in under the ARPA funding? I don't remember, like the 4 or 5 different bullet points, just to make sure we're covered when that comes around.
Yeah,
Yeah, these are general COVID needs.
Okay.
yeah, they all, yeah, and ARPA was more flexible than,
right, the first one.
whatever that acronym was, CARES, yeah.
Yeah.
ARPA is more flexible than CARES, so, yeah. Okay, good updates. Anybody else, any other
What's the
questions?
timeframe that the auction needs to be spent by?
Oh, you have to commit by 2024 and spend it by 2026. I mean, ARPA just got really flexible compared to CARES. They learned the lesson on that one, so, yeah.
Which one of the two came out of we would take out of the capital improvements? Was that the big generator or the light tower?
The big generator.
Yeah, and I think you're the representative on the CIP committee that go, right? I think this presentation today was a really, titled together, but from VML Vaco is a really good example. Just putting those big projects like the school and just continuing to kick them down really doesn't necessarily help anything and looks challenging.
It does look like you push
I mean,
it
if
back.
we're not really planning toward it, then I don't really see any point in continuing to have them on there myself, but that's just my one bit of personal feedback as you all go into it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's helped. I think it's, if anything, it just makes us look like we're about to spend money that
Yeah,
we
looks
have no
like
intention.
potential liability.
Yeah, we have no intention currently
The
of
way it's
spending.
worked, the way it's worked in the past, we generally just look at the next year.
Yeah,
And so we might have to change the process, but I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
I'll tell the
Yeah.
CIP committee and we'll get some thoughts and move forward on that.
all right, that's good.
Yeah, and I think that's all I've got on the update for ARPA.
Okay. All right, well, we got most of the department heads here, if you have suggestions for ARPA, we continue to have the committee talk, not always meet, but just at least talk, so feel free to continue suggestions, and particularly of the small dollar figure, because we are still planning to hold the majority at this point, so we have some better idea about the broadband, so.
One question, if I was still on ARPA. Do you have the capability of storing this stuff inside? Like the generators and the light towers, or would you have to store them outside, or would they be stored outside? Is that okay with them, or a little shelter?
It'd be better if they were undercover. Necessarily have to be if they are, whether we
Yeah.
have to sit outside.
Okay.
So, that is something we're looking at, getting some type of cover down there to put the equipment in, because we're starting to accumulate more and more things that need to be housed.
Okay, thank you.
That's good.
One other thing, it just brought my attention, and we'll look into it and bring it to the committee, but they, maybe some portable, the towable message boards like VDOT has.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
Actually,
that has been
I asked you
discussed
about
before.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't have any kind of price.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and those are all those are the kind of things that, exactly Charlie's point, do fit very clearly in the criteria for ARPA, because they all benefit public safety going forward. Okay, good. All right, burn ban.
Burn ban. All right. So I had some calls from citizens and as well as firefighters. We've had several large brush fires here lately, and Amelia's fared better than Chesterfield and a few surrounding counties. And North Carolina's issued a statewide burn ban right now, where it's a record dry low humidity and as well as it's been these gusty winds, has the potential for fires to get out of control. And we've noticed over the last 3 or 4 weeks that some of the citizens have no regard to fire safety whatsoever. So I reached out to administration as well as to emergency services to see what we could possibly do. Surrounding counties have already issued, I think Nottoway, Prince Edward has, that I know of, have issued their own, and come to find out that Amelia has no policy or resolution in place to enact a ban. So, so Kent looked into it as well as the lawyers to make sure everything would be all right. And I believe he has everything for us so that we could go ahead and initiate, if you'd like to, we could initiate an emergency resolution to start a ban. And also we will create, for in the future, we'll have the ability to where the emergency services director, county administrator could get together and decide if, along with the head chairman of the supervisors, they can decide if one is needed and they can enact it on an as needed basis, like all the other type of emergencies. So I think it's a good proactive measure, and I've got a lot of positive feedback about it so far. So if Kent would like to talk about what he's got, we can discuss it.
I think it's a good idea to have the process in place. So that
Definitely.
we do need it.
Yeah, you don't want emergency stuff to have to wait for a board meeting to come up twice a month.
Which is the current problem we have with this.
Yeah.
Yes.
The handout that I just provided for you basically has three parts to it. The first part is the emergency ordinance, which you all have the capability of enacting for up to 60 days to get us through this particular issue, should you choose to do that. The ordinance itself gives us the capability of issuing a ban. The ordinance does not create the ban. So the first attachment that you have is the emergency ordinance, should you want to do that. The second attachment is the emergency declaration, which, should you choose to do it, will enact a ban on the burning. And again, those are to address an immediate need if you feel like you need to do that tonight. And finally, the third attachment is the proposal for an ongoing true ordinance that would need to be processed through the normal procedures for a new ordinance, which the emergency ordinance and the proposed new ordinance are virtually word for word. And these were reviewed by Mr. Gore earlier. Yes. He's not available tonight. That's what I've got for you. That was what Mr. White had asked for. It's y'all's decision whether or not you feel it's necessary. The emergency order is something you can do tonight if you want to. The emergency ordinance. Then the separate piece is if you want to truly enact a ban tonight, that's the emergency declaration, which again is the second attachment there. And then the final attachment is the proposal for a future ordinance to go through the proper procedures, should you choose to do that.
I've got a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Did prohibited during certain periods is 300 feet from forest lands? That's what the forestry department does in the springtime.
I'm sure that's where the wording came from.
If we're gonna do this emergency ban, shouldn't we cut it all out? I mean,
There's very few situations, from what forestry has told me, there's very few places that don't fall into that category.
okay,
Based on what forestry has told me, I'm not,
okay, I agree with that then.
again, that's where the wording came from.
That's true. 300 feet. Yeah.
And then as far as penalties.
Right.
What's the sheriff's office is gonna process, I mean, what is, are we gonna
Enforce it.
It's gonna, a homeowner's burning his leaves, starts a half acre brush fire, are we go Are we gonna do all or none? Are we gonna do, I mean, how are we gonna feel about that?
I don't follow your question.
If somebody burns down or somebody's reckless with a fire and it gets out of control and burns 50 acres of hardwoods or pines, are they gonna be treated the same as somebody burning leaves, gets out and burns a half acre of their neighbor's brush? I mean, if we gonna say we're gonna enforce something and it's gonna be a penalty, are we gonna do it across the board, or who makes that judgment call is what I'm trying to get at?
So that's over my,
But I mean, it's, if I'm reading this right, it's clear any violation is a class 1 misdemeanor. So I mean,
It never cause damage.
it seems consistent. Yeah, and it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't have to cause damage. It's,
It's burning.
you didn't follow the law.
And my biggest concern from the fire department side, when I was discussing this with people, and David and I talked about that, is more not worried about throwing people in jail for starting fires, but it will give the fire department the authority to put it out. Because we
Right.
can't, right now, you go on somebody's property, you can't just put their fires out. That's bad PR. But
Mhm.
if you have something in place, we can spray it out. And David said they do it in Chesterfield. They have the stuff in place.
Yeah.
But
Well, I don't think we need, so I think this would a little bit resolve your concern for the short term at least. I don't know that we need the
and it also,
emergency ordinance at this point. If we can't help me, but if we proceed with the emergency declaration,
that will not, you don't have, without the ordinance, you don't have the authority.
Yeah, it needs to
in
be
the
advertised.
emergency
Oh,
declaration.
okay, I got
Take
you.
time.
If
So
you
you're
want
doing
to
this one in
tonight,
conjunction with that? Okay.
It's got to be both attachment 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
If you want to ban tonight.
Well, I mean, if we wait, there's no real point because now's when the fires are out of control, getting out of control. So,
and we didn't get the rain today that we were supposed to.
okay, let's try to,
I would
let's
believe
try to resolve that in the
legally,
short term.
if a ban was imposed like that, that would also make the party responsible. They would also be responsible financially for damages as well. Say it did burn up, planted pines or something. I would think versus,
I think that's true today too. I mean, from a legal standpoint, someone can sue them regardless
I guess.
for those damages.
Like,
I mean, that becomes a civil matter and they already can be held
that's-
financially liable, whether it's
Either way.
against the law or not. Yeah.
Did you guys discuss criminal versus civil penalties for this instead of just going to criminal?
I spoke with Mr. Gore specifically about that, and he was not aware. In his judgment, he did not feel that we had the authority to just do a
Fine, a fine.
That's what Mr. Gore advised this afternoon.
Because on some of the other ordinances, he's advising we take the criminal penalties out and substitute with civil.
But you have to have the state law has to have the ability for
The code has to
for
permit it.
us that.
Yeah.
The code in this case only provides for the class 1 misdemeanor.
That was Mr. Gore's judgment.
I'm fine with, you can put that in a motion about the emergency ban. I think we need that. Could save some lives. I know we went to Nottaway the other day. That could have been bad, but luckily the wind was blowing the other way.
Mhm.
But I still got some concern about the burn ban ordinance. Being it has penalties in there. If we put an ordinance, we need to be able to enforce it.
Let's just
And
remove
and
that.
enforce it across the board.
Let's just remove that.
I mean, if the landowner can sue the next landowner,
Yeah.
I will almost feel better leaving it in their hands than,
Well, it says may not shall, so
Right. It doesn't force it anyway.
it's got no teeth to it.
right.
What, maybe you could make a motion then to approve the open ban burning emergency ordinance, removing section 4. And then you don't have to vote on the burning itself because then it authorizes me as the director of emergency management to sign off on that one, correct?
You can, but that has to be ratified by the entire board at their next meeting
Okay,
I would recommend.
so just go ahead and do
If
it.
you're gonna do it.
Just go ahead and do it. Okay.
by vote.
So we could go ahead and do that. And that one doesn't have the penalty in there at all. And then
Start the process.
we can work on the longer term process and better address the concerns about penalties, because we don't need to move forward tonight with number 4.
Right.
What do you think about
That's
that?
my only concern.
Yeah, I'm down. Make a suggestion to address that.
You made the motion on,
You brought it up. Do you want to
I guess we need to do
that
it
address your concern if we do that?
yeah,
one at a
Okay.
time. Need to make a motion to. create
Yeah, just go ahead and do it.
Declaration first.
Well, we don't have public comment period, but if you'd like to.
It's going to involve all of us. How does the public want to know if y'all vote this tonight, tomorrow?
It's all,
We've,
it's all stated in the ordinance.
Is willing to use reverse 911 and code red as well.
And 2, rains the inch next week. Turns off, try again. It will.
Mhm.
Who and how long before you lift this ban?
So that's addressed in here as well. I'm trying to answer your question, but if you don't want the answer, it's okay.
Well, you don't have to answer it to me that way.
It allows us to remove it and restart it as necessary. I don't think we'd want to be removing and restarting week to week. We've done a burn ban multiple times already in the county, so we have experience with doing them. We'd make a decision informed by the director of emergency management and the fire chiefs.
at the most, it would go out of date in 60 days.
Correct.
Yeah, if you don't do
You
anything.
don't have the authority to.
Right. Right.
If we did it tonight, we could evaluate it in January.
No, well, you don't even have to, you can cut, once you,
Well, I mean, well,
it can come off
I say we,
before
I
that.
say Kent and,
yeah,
As far as lifting it. right?
yeah.
yeah, but I'm just being clear. If I really read it, it can come, you don't have to wait for a board meeting to remove it, remove it. Yeah,
Okay.
emergency management can remove it. Yeah. And Jeff is been emailing us on this. This is the same, as Kent's saying, this is the same language that all the other county language and processes that all the other counties are using as well. We're just one of the few that don't already have it on the books. Yeah. Okay. What's your pleasure, board?
I'll make a motion for the declaration, emergency declaration.
For the board, you need
For the, I'm sorry, for the ordinance.
ordinance minus section 4. Minus section 4.
Yes, minus section 4.
Okay. All right, so we've got a motion to approve the open burning ban emergency ordinance with the removal of section 4 regarding penalties. Any final comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor, respond with sign of aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay. Now, emergency declaration.
All right, I'd like to make a motion for the emergency declaration for countywide ban on open burning.
Okay,
May I speak?
yes. That's what I was just gonna,
Oh,
that's what I was just about to do.
Obviously, it
I
ain't
think-
gonna be tonight, so you need to.
Exactly. So we need to, when to be effective.
We could make it effective Friday and that would give time to get it out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Using,
It's the 10th. One Friday or communicate through Friday and it's effective Saturday. Let's
so that would be fine as well, yeah.
10 a.m., December 11th.
11.
All right, you want to restate that as a motion then?
All right,
Be
make a
clear.
motion that we issue a declaration for a countywide ban on open burning effective December 10th at 10 a.m. December
Saturday.
I thought you meant Friday.
Well, I'm asking, which do you want, Friday or Saturday?
I think, 2 days should be plenty of time to get it out, using social media, the reverse 911, as well as.
Whatever you want, whatever y'all want to
Whatever we need,
propose.
so,
I'd do it on Friday.
Okay, 10th,
okay, that's fine. The 10th.
10th at 10 a.m. Okay. All right, we'll recap then. We've got a motion to enact the countywide ban on open burning to be effective December 10th at 10 a.m. Any final discussion or comments, questions on the motion? All those in favor, respond sign of aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. We are at the end of our stated agenda. Is our,
Yes, sir.
You mind getting like whatever day you need.
Yes.
Transmission runs it out the way.
there's no.
Phone number two.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah. There's a number two.
Utilize.
Yeah. We're at the end of the stated agenda. I don't believe we have a need for a closed session. Anyone have any other items? All right, and based on the conclusion of the agenda, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. See you next Wednesday.